Just remembering the time that white women were so lazy they couldn't be fucked to do their own housework. So instead of them letting black women have the same luxury of being able to stay home and care for our families as we hadn't been able to do for at least a couple hundred, 300, 400 years before this point, they made laws. Oh, I'm sorry. They had their men make laws and legislation to force us to work because, again, their men were also too insecure to contend with the idea that black men would ever pull in the same amount of money as them or be just as valued for the labor that they were contributing to the workforce. That's right. As with most instances, when left to our own devices, black people actually found ways to thrive, and we didn't have to be forced into servitude in order to desire to work. Many black men were entering the military for the means of trying to integrate into society, try to contribute back to this country, even though the country had given nothing to them, trying to make money to care for their families and maybe gain a foothold in the world after being born a generation outside of forced servitude, and some of them even experienced slavery firsthand. They didn't have to be forced. They actually wanted to. They signed up for the military, were trying to fight for their country and provide for their wives and children back home. And because the government was actually allowing this and, giving them a little bit of money, because they were giving them an allowance that was going back home to their wives, the black women back home now had enough money to be able to quit these harsh domestic roles in other women's homes and take care of our own families and start building our own home. Well, the disgruntled Wahite people couldn't have that because that would mean leveling the playing field. That would mean that black folks would have a fighting chance to actually start to gain some leverage in society and, start rebuilding or building for the first time our own communities and, being self-sufficient. Which looked a little bit too much like equality to them. That was a little too much humanity for these beasts of burden. So if you see here, basically it says, and I gotta get close, y'all, because y'all know I can't see. But basically it says, Negro women to be put to work, a city ordinance will be passed requiring them to be regularly employed. That is because since these women were now getting allowances from their husbands' hard work and labor in the military, they were now able to focus on themselves and focus on their own family. So for the first time, black women had the luxury of choice and being able to choose to do for themselves. And they did not, obviously, want to spend 16 plus hours in some other motherfucker's house taking care of them. They were choosing to stay home and take care of their own homes. So they had the audacity, black women had the audacity for the first time in forever to actually say, no thank you, I actually don't want to work for a half a penny every 24 hours. I'm gonna stay home and take care of myself and my kids with the money my man is making. So not only were these women exercising autonomy for the first time in ever, but they were actually able to do what the white women were doing. And not only that, white people had to do their own work for the first time. So what did these Wahite women do? These Wahite men and women, but mostly the women do? They complained so much that they forced the government to force black women to get back in their houses, their homes that they should have been caring for, and cook and clean. And it's crazy because if history had taught them anything, it is that black women in proximity to white men means that those white men are going to take advantage of those black women. So you were literally imagine being so lazy that you would rather I'm sorry, I had to gather my thoughts because this is incomprehensible to me, but I also have to remember that a lot of these women didn't even like their own husbands, so I guess they figure the less I have to do for him, the better. But imagine being so lazy that not only are you not willing to clean and care for your own house and children, you are willing to allow your husband to cheat so you can have the luxury of continuing to not care for your own household. Because let's keep it 100%. Most of the time, the black women that were entering these households as domestic workers were also mistresses. Or if they weren't mistresses, they were being assaulted and essayed on a regular basis. Because these lustful monsters were preying not only on their labor, but on the proximity to their subservient bodies, and felt like they were owed access to these black women. So yes, more often than not, these husbands, fathers, brothers, uncles, etc., that y'all were forcing black women in proximity to, were also trying to screw us. Because you don't want to do your own housework, bitch. Like, what?
In the 1700s, there was an act called the Casual Killing Act in Virginia. And what this was a law that said that if you killed someone, black, as a result of correcting them, but it would not be considered a felony, but anyone accused, so giving that punishment, would be basically free of any punishment or any wrongdoing, called the Casual Killing Act. Stay with me. That means you were beating people to death, essentially. What we're talking about here is folks that were beating people to death to such a degree that you had to create a law to protect you from it. Now then, of course, if one looks closely, we go, who then were they trying to protect that was beating someone to death so frequently that you needed a law to protect them? And that would be white women who were beating black children to death. Because, well, whose children were they really?
A few years ago, a creator named Sierra Thompson caused an uproar when she said that one of the most dangerous groups in the US is white women. What she was referring to is the long history of white women's lies leading to horrifying acts of violence against black Americans. For example, in 1921 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a 19-year-old black teenager named Dick Rowland accidentally bumped into a white woman named Sarah Page in an elevator. Page screamed and ran away, and a lie spread that Rowland had assaulted her. This gave a white mob the excuse to go on a murder spree that left hundreds of black people dead in what came to be known as the Tulsa Massacre. 2 years after this massacre, something similar happened in Rosewood, Florida. When a white woman named Fannie Taylor falsely accused a black man of assaulting her, a white mob went on a rampage through the black community, murdering dozens and throwing the bodies into mass graves. In 1955 in Mississippi, a white woman named Carolyn Bryant lied and told her husband that a black teenager named Emmett Till had tried to assault her. That night, Bryant's husband went out and kidnapped Emmett Till, tortured, and murdered him. Neither Carolyn Bryant nor her husband ever faced any consequences for their actions. This dark history is the reason why Sierra Thompson argued that white women can be so dangerous. And she was also responding to several cases across the country in the past few years where white women have called the police on black people, putting their lives in danger. For example, in 2020, a white woman called the police on a black man birdwatching in Central Park after he asked her to put her dog on a leash. Because police encounters with black Americans so often turn deadly, many people argued that by simply making that phone call, this woman was setting herself up to be an accomplice to murder. If we look back at history, what we find is that sometimes white women have played a terrifying role in the violence against black people. And there were even some women who made a career out of calling for this kind of violence, both in the United States and around the world. In the 1920s, Ray Beveridge, a former actress turned right-wing activist, went on a speaking tour across Germany where she protested the presence of black troops in that country. As part of the Versailles Treaty that ended World War I, the Rhineland in Germany became a demilitarized zone. And when the French army occupied that territory, they enlisted black soldiers from Senegal. People like Beveridge began a racist campaign calling for these black soldiers to be removed from Germany to protect white women. Her speeches were titled The Black Horror and The Black Shame. One way that she drummed up racist fears was by constantly warning about the threat of mixed-race children to the purity of the German race. During her tour of 25 German cities, Beveridge warned about the brutal cravings of these savage blacks for white women. In one speech, she said that the Negro has much less capacity to think, but much stronger sensual feelings than the white. She said that Black Beast, with a wild erotic drive, would assault white women, white girls, and white boys. She spread blatant lies about how the victims of this unregulated passion of black men would often be found close to death, their bodies torn through the brutal attacks, some of them with wounds from bites, which showed obviously how the wild black beast had fallen upon its victim. Every single time Beveridge gave a speech, she would include dozens of outright lies, such as that 60% of the children of mixed race were born with syphilis, or that in German brothels, every girl has to satisfy 10 black men every 3 hours. She even took propaganda photos like this one, where she held a well-nourished black child and a malnourished white child, trying to claim that black children were treated better than white children in Germany. During her speeches, Beveridge constantly used the N-word when describing black people, and she argued that the use by France of black troops on the Rhine was detrimental to the culture of the world. She instructed her listeners in Germany to solve this problem the same way that American men did in the South, by lynching. She told them, "Your weapons have been taken away from you, but there is always a rope and a tree. Take up the natural weapons used by our men of the South. Lynch. Hang every black who assaults the white race." Often crowds of 50,000 Germans would listen to these speeches, which Beveridge was paid extremely well for. Another white woman who called for the lynching of black men was the feminist Rebecca Latimer Felton from Georgia. In 1897, she warned that black men were roaming America with a license to degrade and debauch. During one speech in Georgia, Felton said, "If it needs lynching to protect white women's dearest possession from the ravening human beast, then I say lynch, 1,000 times a week if necessary." Now, it's important to note that these accusations of an epidemic of black men assaulting white women were completely false. In the 1890s, the anti-lynching activist Ida B. Wells conducted in-depth investigations into these charges. She found that in a majority of lynchings, the accusations of black men assaulting white women were false, and were only invented later as an excuse to justify this racist violence. The fact that white women played a key role in racism and white supremacy should come as no surprise. From the moment that enslaved Africans arrived in the Americas, white women were critical to the maintenance of slavery and white supremacy. In the book They Were Her Property, Stephanie E. Jones Rogers shows that white women employed management techniques that were as effective and brutal as those used by slave-owning men. White women actively participated in the slave market, profited from it, and used it for economic and social empowerment. The role of women in white supremacy hasn't gone away either. Ever since Trump won in 2016, many people have argued that his victory was rooted in white supremacy and racism. And white women played a key role in electing Trump in 2016 and 2024. Also, in the past few years, we've seen a disturbing rise in white women openly embracing anti-black racism and being proud of their potential to cause harm to black Americans. In 2018, Mississippi Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith told an audience that if she was invited to a public hanging, she'd be in the front row. Many people pointed out how disgusting this statement was, considering that Mississippi had the highest number of lynchings of black Americans in the country. For decades, 2 to 3 black people were publicly hanged or burned alive in Mississippi every week. In 2019, a white woman named Nancy Goodman was caught on camera calling a black woman a stupid N-word in a restaurant. When she was later asked about the incident, she said she would happily use that word again. More recently, a white woman named Shiloh Hendricks called a black child the N-word at a park in Minnesota. When she set up an online fundraiser, she raised over $600,000 from people who left comments like, "White unity will unite," "Whites stand strong," and "White rise." After this story spread around the world, a white woman named Lily Gaddis went on the Piers Morgan show, and she not only defended Shiloh Hendricks using this racial slur against a child, but she admitted that she frequently uses the N-word herself. When white women admit to using the N-word and take pride in their ability to weaponize their whiteness and put black lives in danger, they are following in a dark legacy in this country that goes back to the days of slavery and lynching. That's why it's been so disheartening to see some white women come on this app and talk about how they have black fatigue. Whenever any white person uses this phrase, we all know what they're really saying. Black fatigue is just another way of saying the N-word. And we've seen this kind of rebranding before. We saw how in the early 2000s, white people started using the word thug instead of the N-word. We've seen how racists used the term alt-right when they were really describing the same white supremacy this country has always dealt with. What's so troubling about this conversation around black fatigue is that it fits into a trend of white women gaining influence by using racist dog whistles. When people like Ray Beveridge spread her hatred in the 1920s, she reached thousands of people. Thanks to social media, the Ray Beveridges of today can spread their hate to millions. Now, I want to make it clear that by covering this information, I'm in no way saying that we should condemn all white women, or use this history to incite violence or hatred against any women. We can't change the past, but we can change how we act in the present and how we work together to build a better future. We have to stand up and condemn racism whenever we see it, no matter who it comes from. Because the only real fatigue comes from living in a country that is still poisoned by racism and division. The only way to move forward is united as one.
When I was in graduate school, I learned that white women didn't own property, were not allowed to own property. But in fact, the historian Stephanie Jones Rogers, in her recent book from 2019, They Were Her Property, documents through historical records how white women actually were slave owners, often because their father had died and bequeathed enslaved people to them, or they married a man who had enslaved people and they were co-owners with him. And part of what she documents from the narration of formerly enslaved people is that the white women who were slave owners were especially cruel in their treatment of their enslaved property. And part of the reason that she speculates this is that there was a kind of desire to prove their worth, right, as a worthy slave owner. And it was also a way that white women gained a kind of modicum of power in sort of brokering their leverage over enslaved people to pursue a more wealthy husband or to gain more power in the relationship. One reviewer of this work referred to the kind of treatment that white women exerted on their enslaved people as a kind of imaginative sadism. And that's a phrase that really struck with me because it's something that I recognized in my own family.
Click the link in the bio to get the book.
Do y'all remember that book, They Were Her Property, that challenged the idea that white women were rarely or passively involved in the slave trade? And the question was always, how many white women was it? Well, a student this year decided to answer that question. A student from Ohio State University paired up with a professor, did research, and found the numbers. And we'll get to that in a second. But also, the person that wrote this article, a journalist, decided to do some more research on their own. And they found that a group of Catholic nuns who were praised for decades for helping to educate black children were actually not even educating them and were selling them to pay off debts and expand their school. Let's get started and learn something new. So Professor Trevor D. Logan and the student Benton Wishart did some research from just 1856 to 1861, just in 5 years, and they found that white women engaged in nearly a third of the sales and purchases of enslaved people in New Orleans, which was home to the nation's largest slave market at the time. They also found that in New Orleans between 1856 and 1861, white women participated in nearly 40% of the transactions involving black women. They decided to take it to the 1830s, and remember, this is just New Orleans only. White women accounted for about 16% of the purchases and sales of enslaved black people in New Orleans. They also found another analysis of runaway slave advertisements between 1853 and 1860, which were compiled by a black abolitionist, that found that white women were listed as owners more than 10% of the time. Now, Professor Logan and the student Benton fully credit Stephanie E. Jones Rogers in her extensive research. She's an historian at the University of California, and she wrote the book, They Were Her Property, and released it in 2019. And she is fully thanking them them for finally getting the numbers, because every time she had to talk about this book, people always question, well, was it that many? How many white women was it? And now we're going to get to the nuns who sold these children. Now, the nuns were called the Georgetown Visitation Sisters, and they founded the Georgetown Visitation Preparatory School in Washington, D.C., one of the nation's oldest Roman Catholic girls' schools. For more than a decade, its founders were hailed on the school's website for running a free institution and for their generosity of spirit for teaching enslaved girls. But several years ago, the school's archivist and historian began digging in the archives. She found no evidence that the nuns had taught enslaved children to read or write. Instead, she discovered that the sisters had enslaved at least 107 black men, women, and children. And in a report released in 2018, the school reported that the sisters sold dozens of those people to pay debts to help finance the expansion of their school and the construction of a new chapel. In fact, nearly all of the orders of Catholic sisters established by the late 1820s enslaved people. Nothing else to do than to dispose of the family of Negroes. Mother Agnes Brent, the superior of the Georgetown Visitation Sisters, wrote in 1821 as she approved the sale of a couple and their 2 young children. The enslaved woman was just days away from giving birth to her 3rd child. Of course, we're not shocked by any of these numbers, but one of the historians said it's good to actually have numbers. They help us to attach something resembling specifics to what we're actually talking about. And this last paragraph sums up the last month. Dr. Jones Rogers believes the research also helps to explain why many white Southern women romanticized slavery and supported the system of racial segregation that emerged after the Civil War and now, a system that helped ensure that their families could continue to benefit from a plentiful supply of low-cost black labor. They choose white supremacy because they see it as economically advantageous. I hope you learned something new.
This is the book of Obadiah, chapter 1, verse 10, and it reads, For thy violence against thy brother Jacob, shame shall cover thee, and thou shalt be cut off forever. Giving all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Rahakodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well in teaching me this 100% truth. Salutations to them and my fellow Akim who labor in this truth week in and week out on the highways and byways. Also, salutations to the hopeful elect of the scattered 12 tribes of Israel, scattered to the 4 corners of the earth, that be like unto the speckled bird, also known as your Israelite foreigners, and your so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. To you, I say Shalom. This is your brother Ayashar Barazal, a prophet of doom from the Indianapolis branch of the Great Millstone, coming back at you with another lesson that is edifying to the elect body of the nation of Israel. All right, before I get into this lesson, I just want to declare fair use, according to the Copyright Act of 1976, as so stipulated under Section 107. There's no monetary gain from this video lesson, so I just want to reiterate fair use as it was declared at the beginning of the video, but just want to say it for the audible purposes as well. All right, you just saw a collage of historical facts regarding the Edomite woman, or the so-called white woman, all over the globe. And they have a lot of our blood on their hands, even to this very day. So today's lesson won't be a specific subject, but it's just globally that the so-called white woman is not innocent in the death and destruction of Jake. All right. Neither will she be acquitted. Okay. She played a huge role in not only a lot of us being exterminated, but our lands being taken as well too. All right. You know, look at the Rosewood, Black Wall Streets. Because of some lie, had us run out of our communities. Most of the people are killed, and then they took the land. All right. All because of some false accusation that she made of those so-called white woman tears. All right. But yeah, this says, for thy violence against thy brother Jacob. Every week, we've been talking about the man, but no, that so-called white woman had a lot to do with it too. All right. A whole lot, as you saw. Laws created for her, the Casual Killing Act, that stuff. She was had a huge role in slave ownership, especially in the South. Huge role. All right. So once again, she will not be acquitted in that day of judgment, and she is not innocent. All right, so I'm just going to focus on that for this particular lesson. Just pull out a few scriptures, make it short to the point, because you got a lot of information before the actual scriptures are brought out. All right, this is the book of. Oh yeah, let me finish this one. Yeah, it says that shame shall cover you. Like her male counterpart, she's been exposed for what she's done throughout history too. All right, being exposed. And like the scriptures say, they're going to be cut off forever. No more existence, for the so-called white man. And they know it. That's why they're getting angry right now. They know time is short. What's that? Most empires last 250 years. America, a.k.a. Babylon the Great, is in its 249th year this year. Yeah, so the prophets could see it. The true prophets, those who are teaching the true doctrine, GMS and the ones who teach the same doctrine. Okay, she's not the so-called woman is not the mark of the beast, the MOTB. Yeah, sleeping with white women. Come on now, no. As the scriptures say, a little one shall be 1,000. How's that going to happen in the kingdom? They're going to have to bring back, all the lives that they took. Some of them going to come back through them. Because we know the male seed line is going to be exterminated, according to Isaiah chapter 14, verse 21 and 22. All right? They have to pay for those sins. All right? And as they're dying off in the kingdom, scripture said, their widows are not going to mourn for them. I believe that's in Job 27 and 15. They're not going to mourn for them. Why would they? They're on the bottom now. And we know, in time, a woman's going to switch over. She's going to follow the power. And the nation of Israel is going to have it forever. But in the meantime, she's going to have to deal with her iniquities as well. All right. So yeah, they're going to be cut off forever. But before that happens, yeah, it's going to be a lot of y'all going to be concubines. All right. But get back to the information in hand. All of those informational videos that you saw where they were involved in our slaughter. This is the book of Exodus, chapter 23, verses 1 and 2. It says, "Thou shalt not raise a false report. Put not thine hand with the wicked to be an unrighteous witness." And that's exactly what they did. Told those lies. And once that lie spread, you had those white mobs could come together, not only get the wrong man, but destroyed everybody, and just to justify to do it. A lot of those cases found out that they weren't even guilty for what they were accused of. That's all it took was an accusation, and look what it did. All right. And it says, "Thou shalt not follow a multitude to do evil, neither shalt thou speak in a cause to decline after many to arrest judgment." Yeah, you double down on your lie. All right. When you knew it wasn't true. Like that in Rosewood. All right. The movie Rosewood. You take a look at it. And you were never held accountable for it. That was a consistent theme in all of those clips. You were never held accountable for what you did. Most recently, what's that? The lady that had Emmett Till offed, Carolyn Dunham Bryant. She was never held accountable for that. But that's okay. We know what the scriptures say. All right. This is the book of Ecclesiastes. Chapter 8, beginning in verse 11. And it reads, "Because sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily, Therefore, the heart of the sons of men is fully set in them to do evil. And y'all kept doing, even to this very day. It hasn't stopped. It has not stopped. You know, that guy, Botham John, killed in his apartment, because she went to the wrong apartment. And then his silly ass family, ask, can you give a hug and forgive her? She didn't took your brother out and the son out. Jake is just stupid. All right. Because they, definitely don't know the scriptures, because Esau can't be forgiven. All right. Forgiveness and repentance of sins is only for the nation of Israel. Okay. It's only for the nation of Israel, according to the 5th chapter of Acts. All right. Right around verses 30, 31. All right. Goes on, verse 12 says, though a sinner do evil 100 times and his days be prolonged, that's exactly what scriptures say. Psalm 73:5, they're not in trouble as other men, neither are they plagued like other men. All right. Jake meets a certain death when he goes off in this place. All right. Where Esau get a slap on the hand, not even charged. Okay. Says, and his days be long, yet surely I know that it should be well with them that fear Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai, which fear before him. And that's talking about his elect, us. It's going to go well with us, being obedient. All right. Even though we're going to have some afflictions in the course of this journey to the everlasting kingdom. All right. It says verse 13, but it shall not be well with the wicked, neither shall he prolong his days, which are as a shadow, because he feareth not before Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. And yeah, the Lord is saving you for the end, that ultimate wrath, and you going into slavery twice as long and twice as hard as we did, but in righteousness. Okay? We're not going to be doing the wicked stuff that y'all were doing, cutting off your rods, a buck breaking. No, that ain't going to happen. All right? We're going to do it in righteousness, and best believe that righteousness can be just as intense, if not more, than what you consider what's wicked. All right? You're going to pay. You're going to feel. We already know how it is now. Everything that Jake has had to adapt to in this country, you get a taste of it, and you lose your mind. But yeah, that woman, that so-called white woman, has a lot of Israelite blood on her hands too. A lot of it. All right? And once again, she is not innocent, and she will not be acquitted in that day of judgment. All right? And he's going to deal with both of you, the man and the woman. Let's get that. This is the book of Psalms, chapter 109, beginning at verse 12. It says, let there be none to extend mercy unto him, neither let there be any to favor his fatherless children. Yeah, it's going to be rough out there for y'all in that day of judgment. All right? No mercy. Everybody knows what you did. Everybody's remembering what you did. And we bring that out every week, twice a week, in these For Thy Violence Against Thy Brother Jacob videos. This is, I think, number 123 today. And we haven't even scratched the surface. Each one of those clips at the beginning of this lesson could have been its own story. But, I looked at the common denominator, that so-called white woman. Again, she is not innocent, and she will not be acquitted. All right? But she will have a purpose. She will have a purpose. Bringing a lot of those, bearing a lot of those Israelite lives that she was responsible for taking out. All right? Verse 13 says, let his posterity be cut off, and in the generation following, let their name be blotted out. And I go into this word posterity all the time. It literally means from the progenitor of a nation to all future generations of that said nation. All right. And in particular, we're talking about Esau, Edom. All right. The so-called white man who is the wicked, according to Malachi 1 and 4. All right. He says, let their name be blotted out. Okay. Same thing it says in Isaiah 14, right around verses 21 and 22. You know, the name's going to be cut off from Babylon. All right. Which is America. Verse 14. It says, let the iniquity of his fathers be remembered with Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, and let not the sin of his mother be blotted out. You hear that? That's you too, Edomite woman, for all the dirt that you've done. All right? A lot of you talking bad, on these platforms, in these comment sections of these articles. Running your mouth like you won't have to give an account for what you've said and done, but you will. All right, verse 15. So yeah, he'll be dealing with you too, that mother. Verse 15 says, "Let them be before Yahweh Bashem Yahushai continually, that he may cut off the memory of them from earth." Them, male and female. Okay? For all the stuff that you've done. You all are going to be cut off of the memory, from everyone on earth. Like a vapor, like a bad dream. Because that's really what it is. That's why you don't, you come against the term woke. Even that's wrong. You even misappropriated that term. But you got a problem with people being woke because you want them to continue to live in that bad dream while you do all your damn dirt. All right? That's over with. Absolutely over with. And like I said, you're going to have to pay. Yeah. With your own lives. You defiled this land without blood. Like the scriptures say, Numbers 35 and 33. The only way to pay that back is by the blood of him that shed it, which is you, Esau, All right? And it's going to be the Lord, but it's going to do it by the hand of his people. You can get that in Joel chapter 3, verse 19 through 21. All right? Our land is, this land is defiled with our blood. And the only way to cleanse it is with yours. And that's going to happen. All right? This is the book of Revelation, chapter 18. Verse 5. 18, verse 5. It says, "For her sins have reached unto heaven, and Yahweh Hashem Yahushai Salakia have remembered her iniquities." All right? "Reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her double according to her works. And the cup which she hath filled to her double." You got a lot of shit to pay for. A lot. And he said double. Twice as long, twice as hard. You're going to pay for what you did. And once again, we know that Edomite man put hell on us, but once again, is that woman is not innocent. Not innocent whatsoever. All right? And she gonna pay for that. All right? After she serves her purpose. A servant, handmaid, concubine. Having her role in that seed becoming 1,000. Yeah. Yeah, when y'all get in the kingdom, especially if you're the good looking ones, hey, take one good look at your feet. because you probably won't see him, bringing so many kids, back through. You took a lot of lives. You took a lot of lives, a lot of them, with your one lie and your white woman tears. You took a lot of lives. All right, even though it was foreordained by Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, ultimately the judgments for him, because he's responsible for the issues of death. But like the scriptures say, you all furthered the affliction. All right. So I'm gonna close out with this. Back in the book that I opened up with, Obadiah. Go straight to the point. 1 verse 18. All right. And it says, and the house of Jacob, that's the southern kingdom, shall be a fire, and the house of Joseph, that's the northern kingdom, a flame. See, this is the point we're back together as one nation, as it's prophesied in Ezekiel 37, which is happening right now. The northern kingdom, southern kingdom come back together to be one nation. All right. He says, and the house of Esau, the so-called white man, for stubble. All right. After you've served your time in slavery, rounded up and burnt up, gone forever. All right. For stubble, it says, and they shall kindle in them and devour them, and there shall not be any remaining of the house of Esau, for Yahweh Bahashem Yahushai have spoken it. Nothing remaining of you, nothing. So enjoy this short time that you have, enjoy it. Laugh it up. I said I was going to finish off with this one. I'm leading right into Lamentations 4. Salaki. 21, 22. Yeah. So, like I said earlier, every empire, the Roman Empire, this is revival and has a span of about 250 years. Babylon the Great, aka America, is in its 249th year. And shit is moving real fast. If you're keeping up, you can see it. All right? So, enjoy this time while you have it. This is Lamentations 4 and 21. It says, rejoice and be glad, O daughter of Edom, that dwellest in the land of Uz. The cup also shall pass through unto thee, and thou shalt be drunken, and thou shalt make thyself naked. You being exposed. 365, 24/7, around the clock, of all the wickedness that you've done. And look at it, like I said, you're going to be a drunken, You're real hasty right now and sloppy. All right. He says, verse 22, the punishment of thine iniquity is accomplished, O daughter of Zion. That's talking about the Israelites. He will no more carry thee away into captivity. All right. It says, he will visit thy iniquity, O daughter of Edom. He will discover thy sins. Yeah. That's what's happening right now. And it only goes downhill for you, Esau, Edom, after that. Only goes downhill. We see you crumbling now. But once again, like I said, I want to do a little something different today with this one. That Edomite woman has a lot of blood on her hands when it comes to Jake. And just like her male counterpart, she's got to pay. All right. So with that, I hope this lesson was edifying to the elect body of the nation of Israel. Once again, I'm going to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Rahahakwadash. Double honor to the apostles and elders of great millstone who rule well in teaching us this 100% truth. Salutations to them and my fellow Arkham who labor in this truth week in and week out on the highways and byways. Also, salutations to the hopeful elect of the scattered 12 tribes of Israel, scattered to the four corners of the earth, that be like unto the speckled bird, also known as your Israelite foreigners, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. To you, I say Shalom, Kwam Yasharallah, Abba Baba. We got next. Shalom.